Hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth Poetry in session of day 2 of the Poetry Lit Festival. I've been watching the whole thing. I've had a great time. Haven't had any dinner. I don't know about spooky action at a distance, which was how Patrick Errington was talking about his work earlier. But if spooky means magical, then we've definitely had that today. I am very pleased to now welcome Mandy Haggith, Alison Hallett, and Eleni Kay, who will each read in turn, and then we will all come together and answer some questions. And we do have an open mic spot at the end as well. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Mandy Haggith to the stage. Mandy lives in Assynt in the Northwest Highlands, and her new book is The Lost Elms. Mandy, welcome.
Thanks very much, Iain, and thanks for having me here in the festival. I'm really pleased to be here, and hello to anybody who's watching. So I'm going to just read one poem, which is a poem that I wrote when the oldest elm tree in Europe, which was in Beaulieu here in the Highlands of Scotland, finally succumbed to Dutch elm disease. And it was known locally in Beaulieu as the guardian of the gateway because it stood at the gateway of Beaulieu Priory. And we know exactly how old it was, and it was more than 800 years old when it died in 22. And we know that because it was planted by the monks who built Beaulieu Priory back in the early 1200s. And they, as they planned out the priory grounds, that included an avenue of elm trees. And the last one of them still standing was the one at the gateway, which had outlived the priory by a very considerable time, certainly outlived all those monks by a very considerable time. And I was commissioned to write something to say goodbye to it. And the result was the poem that I'm going to read. When I went to meet this aged old tree, I thought I would write a poem about mourning and loss and decay and senility, perhaps. And in fact, when I met the tree, I realized that there was something much more joyful, I think, to be said. And I ended up writing in the voice of the tree, and read it out at the community event that sort of celebrated the life of this magnificent tree. And it's been a very auspicious thing for me to do because it led to me being asked then to write a book about elm trees, and so I'm going to give the little plug to my new book, The Lost Elms, which includes this poem at the end as an appendix to what's otherwise a creative nonfiction book of a part memoir, part science, part folklore, lots of things about elms. But with no further ado, here is Elm Tree Talk. So you have to imagine that I'm a tree for this. I am Leven, Witch Elm, Ulmus glabra, Orm, Yep, Rüster, Vyas, Yalava. My life spans many of yours. I see deep into the earth and high into the sky. I do not move as you do. But please don't mistake my standing stillness as any kind of lack. I spread underground. I dance with gales and storms, scatter my leaves and twigs and seeds. Sometimes I see humans value movement over growth, growth over rhythm, but rhythm is everything. I've been rocking to the pulse of sun and moon for centuries. Listen. Tree time is not like your time. I've watched you for 800 sun cycles, concluded long ago that you are strange creatures of movement and desire. Still yourselves for a moment, please. Put down all your wishes and longings, all your cravings and dissatisfaction. Lighten yourself and breathe our gift, oxygen. the one thing you can't do without, but often seem to leave off your wish list. But I'm not here to criticize. I don't want anything. Least of all you feeling bad or not wanting to listen. So, breathe, settle, tune into tree talk. I wish for nothing. I do not know desire. No dreams or dreads, no hopes or disappointments. I stand and the world is here in all its diverse, subtle and endlessly changing beauty. I wish for nothing because I am full from crown to root tip with wonder. I say I because you expect a voice of singular identity, which seems to be how you perceive yourselves. But I am really we. We are a community. Though you may see me as just a tree, I am wasps and willow herbs, spiders and their silken threads, netted midges, mosses, lichens, an asylum-seeking cherry tree brought by one of my many birds, a bounty of boring beetles, and in the soil a riot of life I can't begin to tell you of, for if I do, I'll enter a fungal epic that will keep you here until your leaves fall for the last time too. It is enough to say they smell divine. Breathe in their petrichor after a downpour of blessed rain. I swear you'll never feel the same. Good old-fashioned air, it's better than prayer for getting you to a state of peace or even bliss. I've often felt bliss. It's the sun's best present, that feeling of being drenched in sweetness. Did I mention the birds? All those songs we've sung. That's one thing your monks did really well. Music billowing from that building over there, booming and brilliant, or murmuring yet still melodious. Heartfelt harmonies and tunes that filled my phloem and still flow within me. Keep on with your music, people. Your crafts of making our wood into pipes, or fiddle and bow, cello and oboe. Don't ever let that go. Please, you bring your gifts into the world, and everyone on earth knows that's what you do. Paintings, sculptures, knitted wool, boats, those filigrees of silver, all your arts are fine. And for that, we forgive you everything. And we all know there's plenty needs forgiving. The CO2? I've done my best to, as you might say, suck it up. But steady on. That's all I'll say. Because I'm here to praise, to thank the earth for giving me this life, these lives, our lives. I'll not go on much longer. I just want to let you know how I feel for you, fumbling your ways into the future. Yes, I feel for you, and feeling is where we're just the same. Touch my sun-warmed wood with your skin, and I touch you. Stroke me, hug me, and our pleasure is mutual. We become one. Thank you very much.
That was incredible. I've been rocking to the pulse of sun and moon. I loved that. I mean, I loved it all, but that particular line, wow. Thank you so much, Mandy. I shall return to ask you questions, probably about that. I would imagine shortly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Iain. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the poetry.
Thank you. Next, we have Alison Hallett, and I have a fantastic description here. Alison is a poet whose community of collaborators includes sculptors, scientists, dancers, and stones. Welcome, Alison.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm going to read 4 poems. The first was inspired by a quotation that I found. It's a poem called Split Tongues, and it's in the latest Candlestick Press publication, 10 poems from Somerset. I live in the county of Somerset in the UK. And I found this quote, if you split a starling's tongue with a silver sixpence, the bird can be taught to speak more impressively. And I thought, God, how astonishing that people have thought that if you split a tongue, this bird could sound more impressive. And then I began reflecting on my own tongue and what I consider to be a splitting of my own tongue, particularly in relation to class. In the UK, there's often been an emphasis upon, received pronunciation, the Queen's English, and there was a time when regional accents were not considered to be proper English. A lot of that's changing now, thank goodness. But this poem reflects this idea. Split tongues. Oh yes, indeed. If you split a starling's tongue with a silver sixpence, the bird can be taught to speak more impressively. Anonymous, 16th century. I was born into the music of Somerset, the music of udders and milk, herons and reams. Our mouths were mirrors of earth, thick with it, ridged and gorged with it. I couldn't wait to get away. Please, I said, can I go to university? I might as well have said Mars or Pluto. Yes, they said, even though the factory was all we knew. Sons and daughters of lawyers and doctors laughed at how I spoke. Everything Somerset sounds stupid, they said. Wurzels and baler twine and scrumpy. I found a silver sixpence and split my tongue, leaned into posh, spoke less impressively. This next poem may be the only thing you need to know. It references my father and a wheeze. My father had emphysema from working in the factory, and that's what the wheezing is from. Metamorphosis on a Tuesday afternoon. Imagine my office, a strip-lit room, radiator full on, computer purring. I've eaten a quick lunch, and now I'm checking my phone. One missed call, a message from my dad. Unrecognizable at first, no words, just a wheeze. Shit, I think, what's wrong? But then it comes, distant and distinct, the sound I'd asked him to record. Imagine, if you can, a stag's roar ricocheting through the Quantock Hills. A flamethrower of a noise, a cry from the fire in his balls. I play it again and again, sound so at odds with these clean white walls, I see them dissolve. There's a knock at the door. I should move. But imagine my office. It's no longer an office. There's a breeze in my hair. My feet have turned to hooves. For the last couple of years, I've been working with a multidisciplinary team looking at returning some rocks to Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's interesting, there's a lot of repatriation and rematriation happening, and often of cultural objects, or objects that have been shaped by humans. These rocks are not shaped by humans, but they are very connected with ancestral traditions. Return, a meditation. a return of land to land, self to self, deep roots and recognition, a regenerative return, return that fuels the soul, sets an ethics of location spinning. I am located, therefore I am. Return breathed deeper. Return admits the journey that makes return possible. Return heart to heart, swing back, reunion. Volcano returns to volcano, rock to ancestor, ancestor to rock. Rock restores sun and moon, bones and lava, rivers and stars. Land returns to land, rocks return to rocks, rocks return humans to ground, grounded, grounding, spirals of reparation. And I think I have time for one more. If I don't have time, maybe somebody can either remove me from the screen or make a signal. But I think I've got room for one more. This is called Meanwhile, There's a Genocide Happening in Gaza. Every day for 2 months, or is it 11 weeks, I've photographed a particular echinacea flower and sent it to a friend. We've followed the flower's progress, emergence of petals, central cone rising and expanding, glints of yellow pollen. Now it's turning from red to black, slowly at first, and then, after days of heavy thunder, more quickly. There was a time when little seemed to change, and I thought the flower might last forever. When I forget to take a photo, the friend messages and asks, "How's flower today?" She has become important to us, companion, presence, alchemist. I don't know what I'm learning from this or how it relates to genocide, but I do know that me and my friend love this flower, that we've become a trio, a trinity of observation and care. Now echinacea is emptying out for autumn. Usually I'd have dead-headed her, but not this year. I can't cut her stem, can't sever this ongoing community of witness. To see another and be seen is heart medicine. Dear friend, dear flower, how dear is it to unveil who we are to each other in these fragile days. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alison. Amazing poems there. I would like to go back to the first one there, and I mean, all wonderful. The split tongues, I don't know if you noticed, I don't have a particularly RP accent myself.
Yep.
So that particularly was a great one for you to start on for me. Being born into the music of Somerset and then going into others was great. Alison, thank you so much. We shall return to you in a moment. And now we are turning to Eleni Kay. Eleni, I believe, is going to be sharing her poems on the screen. Now, Eleni is a Slovakian-born poet living in Norway. She writes in English, Slovak, French, Norwegian, and Spanish. Her award-winning poems have been widely published, including in Atticus Review, Poetry Island Review, and Acumen. And her latest collection is Love Algorithm by Black Spring Publishing. Eleni, welcome.
Thank you, Iain, and thank you everyone for watching, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. I'll share 4 short poems. The first one is from a pamphlet called Autumn Dedications, since it's autumn now. Then I'll read one from another pamphlet called A Small Love Dictionary of Untranslatable Japanese Words. I'm very keen on Japan and Japanese as a language. Then the third poem will be from Colors of the Swan, which was beautifully illustrated by Kate Wyatt. And I'll finish off with a poem from a book collection, Love Algorithm, published by Black Spring Press. And I think you will not see me because I'll be sharing the screen, so that's why I wanted to show you first. Okay, I hope it's working for you. So the first poem is called Theology of Divorce. When the judge asked why, we didn't have an answer. The wish for belonging? Maybe. The otherness? Perhaps. The timing? Most probably. Between a shared past and a divorced future, our breakup granted us a surreal feeling of presence. When true love ends, religion suddenly makes sense. The next poem is titled with the Japanese word aiki, which in Japanese means blending, harmonizing, opposing forces within oneself. If I was the slaveholder of time, I would command it to selectively numb the deeply entrenched and yet elusive memory of you. I would make love colorless, remove all signs and symbols that denote the pulsing space between two people. But alas, until the glory of time departs, we will set and we will rise like a phoenix from the ashes of its counterparts. They told you that all fairy tales have a beginning, middle, and an end. They didn't tell you that in love there are no boundaries, that sky is made of small twisted lines of transparent paint, that behind the sunset, passion never disappears, that one image is more than 1,000 words and louder than the cry of the sirens, that the most beautiful moment is when we let the dragonflies land on us in silence. And I'll finish with a poem called Job Interview for Love. Have a seat on a grain of dust. Make yourself at home. Don't worry about your appearance. The love angels will patch up all flaws, decide on your golden hours, dance them into a sweet circle like bees in a honeycomb. Stretch your feet, scrape off the mud of rejections. Don't worry about your selling points. The angels are not interested in whatever dwells on the shores of your memory, nor the tissue-like possibilities of what could have been. Smile. Lean your bones against their warm wings. Don't worry about your lack of experience. They will not grade your efforts. They will lie down on your chest, listen to your melody, then offer you a permanent position. Thank you very much.
Oh, Eleni, thank you so much. I absolutely loved all of those poems, but that last one, don't worry about your selling points. Yeah, I could do with a copy of that poem, I think. Thank you. That's absolutely wonderful. I would like to get the three of you together now, if possible. What I'd like to do is I would actually like to start by asking you a question each. Hopefully connected to what you've been what you read today, and then so I'll ask you those one at a time. Then I'll ask some more kind of open questions that we can all three answer. So I think I'll start with Mandy as you went first. I am, well, first of all, you are fresh from your book launch, I believe, because I think that it was last night. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit more about the book in a moment, actually. But if I were given the chance to write a poem about an 800-year-old tree that had died, I don't know how I would even begin to go about doing that. So can you talk us through that, basically?
Well, yeah. I mean, I went to see it. I mean, I went to sit with the tree. That's the obvious thing to do, isn't it? And just to hang out with it for a while. And I yeah, I thought it was going to be quite a melancholy experience. The tree was kind of on its last legs, last few leaves kind of with it withering back. And my dad was kind of very demented by that stage, kind of very late on in the process of decline. So I really thought I was going to be writing about senescence and death, and steeled myself for that. and then but I just trusted that if I went and sat with the tree, then and took notes, basically. So I did that thing of just went with my notebook and just started scribbling to see. And of course, what I realized was that the tree was teeming with life, and that I was absolutely riveted by how much there was in the way of vibrancy, and how sensorily I could fully engage with the tree, even though it was dying. And so that sense of being welcomed by the tree into the community that is the tree was something that was, I felt, really uplifting. And that process of dying is also a process of living. And that was yeah, that was the overwhelming kind of feeling. And I went back 2 or 3 times, and the poem just sort of seemed to be writing itself, like the tree seemed to be writing a poem for me. Is what it felt like. So yeah, that's what happened.
Amazing, thank you. I'm quite interested. Did it start off as being written in the voice of the tree then, or did it go through a few permutations before it got there?
There were lots of notes, but at the point where I kind of hit upon realizing how to what the poem was, yes, it began with I.
Okay.
Yeah. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Lost Elms then? I mean, I know that it's not necessarily a poetry book, but did that come from this poem, or how did that work?
Yeah. So I wrote the poem, read the poem at the community event. There was quite a lot of coverage about it because it was such a significant tree. And then I was approached by the publisher to ask if I would pitch a proposal for a book about elm trees, which hadn't really crossed my mind until they asked me to pitch. And they were asking a couple of other people as well, and they liked my proposal more than the others. So I found myself, and as I wrote the proposal, I realized that actually I've had this lifelong relationship with elm trees, which since I was a child, that was so I have a lot to say about elms, I guess, and I love doing research, and so I was determined to research it and to make it as a global book, because of course elms are everywhere and have been, and although they have been devastated, hundreds of millions of elms have died around the world of Dutch elm disease. There's also a story of hope within them, and certainly where I live up in Ascent, we still do not have Dutch elm disease, touch wood, and so we still have healthy and very magnificent elms to celebrate and enjoy. And yeah, and there's that poem is in the book. It's in 10 chapters, and each chapter has a particular vignette of a particular tree, and some of that is quite poetic, at least in its language. So there's almost like sort of a prose poem per book, per chapter about the trees. And there's a whole chapter about the literature of trees, which is predominantly around predominantly about elm tree poetry, of which there's a huge amount, and elms have been symbolic of death and mourning, and there's an awful lot of kind of mourning poems around elms out there in the world. So it's been very gratifying to kind of join the canon. Every poet worth their salt has written a poem about elm trees, so I discovered in the process. So yeah, it's been great project to do.
Thank you so much, Mandy. I really loved hearing that poem. It was
Thank you.
Immense. So Alison, I would now like to I think was the poem called Return, the poem called Return, and this kind of links to a little bit of research that I did, where I found out that you were the first poet in residence at a university geography department, and I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that. Was that poem part of that, or was that
no? That was quite a long time ago. That was with a Leverhulme Award,
yes.
So which doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it's a kind of tragedy for our poetry community that I realized that so many of the residencies I've been able to do don't exist anymore. So there was this fabulous residency program where artists and creatives went into university departments for a year that wouldn't usually have an artist or creative in them. So I got to work with mainly physical geographers, and I went on a field trip to Iceland, and a book came out of that, actually. But I did lots of things. I went into lectures and read poems. I installed poems in the department. I worked with a sculptor, and we put words in boulders. And particularly the field trip, it was interesting because a lot of the students were very suspicious. They were like, what on earth is a poet doing here? And so it was very interesting to have conversations and to start. I like to think of it as kind of science friction, to start bringing a bit of friction in. So you realize some places where you have similarities, particularly around observation, and probably a passion for what you're looking at, but access to very different language to talk about it. So yeah, they're very interesting kind of discordances and counterbalances in that kind of work. But the return poem is from a more recent collaboration in Bristol.
Can you tell us a little bit about that collaboration?
Okay, so I started working at the Bristol University School of Earth Sciences department with an Earth Art Fellowship, and I was working with scientists around a crater that had been caused by a meteorite. So, I've worked with the migration habits of stones for a very long time, for 25 years now, but I'd never thought about meteorites before. So that was one thing. And then I moved into another project. We were very lucky to get a grant to look at stones that have been brought to the UK from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So in geology, obviously they need a lot of samples to study. And I think that there's been a tradition of just taking rocks, whereas these rocks were brought with the permission of the indigenous iwi. So a geologist asked if the rocks could be taken for research. And they were given permission as long as the rocks returned. So I've just spent 2.5 years working with geologists, a curator, an art historian, an anthropologist, looking at this process of return, repatriation, rematriation, ethics in relation to stones, and what happens when you don't take a stone with you. So I feel like I've been off in this whole other trajectory, and there'll be a book coming out about this next year with poems and contributions from the other people in the project. Yeah.
How brilliant! How fascinating. So, will all of your stuff be poetry then, or will it be like Mandy's, where there's prose and
all my stuff in there is poetry, but there's prose from other contributors in there. Yeah.
Does it have a title yet that I can look out for?
It's being called Migrating Rocks.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I asked that question now. And now over to Eleni. So now, Eleni, I made some notes here, and it said, I would make love colourless. And it said, sky is transparent paint. Now, I loved these lines, but what surprised me about these lines is that these were about colour. And actually, when I was talking to you about your research, you said that your research is often on olfaction and the sense of smell. So we'll move from colour to the sense of smell on here. Can you tell us how you combine that with your poetry?
That's a good question, and you are absolutely right. I didn't quite reference smell in my poems, actually ever. I use smell in more of an abstract sense, a bit like when Mandy was reading her poem about how, the senses connect us to nature and how divine the smells were around the tree. I feel that I wish I could perhaps bring the smells behind me to you, and you could have the sort of scent landscape as a shared experience, just like we are now sharing the sound and the image. And of course, with smells, we are left to our words that don't always do justice to the beautiful smells or the various different odors around us. So in my research, I am basically studying how the sense of smell works with very young children. I'm a researcher in early olfaction, so the sense of smell with young children and how we can enhance their smell vocabulary. So trying to teach young children from young age to be using their nose strategically and to know how to name the different odors around them, with the hope that the next generation will be better than us adults to recognize and name and engage with the different smells around us.
Amazing, thank you. You won't have heard it, but there was an absolutely pour down just before here. So
same here, it's raining.
And I'm looking forward to going outside and getting it in.
Get the better. Yes.
So, thank you for that, Eleni. Now, I'm going to ask this to all of you now, and it kind of feels relevant to, we talked about olfaction, we've talked about geology, we're talking about nature a lot. And Steph last night said, because she was far more eloquent than I was when she was talking about poetry, she said that the best poetry uses both sides of the brain, so the logical and the magical. And I think that all of your work that we've seen today has done both of those things. So starting with Mandy, I wonder how do you feel about that statement that the best poetry uses both sides of the brain? Oh, you're on mute, Mandy.
Thank you. Yeah, totally. For me, the poetry process begins, it comes from wonder, and for me, wonder begins with an animal experience and an emotional kind of response to experience and for me, mostly that's, I think, why most of my poetry is about the natural world, because it comes from being out in the natural world and encountering something with my senses and going wow and wanting to share that, and that wonder I think like is where the urge to write poetry comes from, and that's absolutely not logical. But what I think is necessary in the poetic process is the other kind of wonder. So for me, when you've the wow wonder kind of wonder turns into wondering, and the beginning of questions and the thought processes about what the world is about, and so wonder becomes wondering, and so those two, which does, I guess, engage with the kind of logical part of the brain. And it's like once that is engaged, then we start trying to play with language to try to kind of like put those things together. So yeah, I completely agree.
Thanks, Mandy. That's very, very helpful for me actually as well. Alison, how do you feel about the statement about the logical versus the magical?
Well, I feel slightly troubled. So I'm going to try and queer it a bit, because I feel that it's a binary. And with most binaries, it's like, well, where is that paradigm coming from? And so many binary paradigms have been, I think, very damaging and quite a violent intrusion. So I would say, I don't know. And often if you have a two, it's like when you collaborate, a third thing is made. So this notion of the one and the other, I find slightly ludicrous. I mean, I know we lean into it a lot, but it's like, really, why is that there? So I'm going to be a bit of a magpie and steal from what some of Mandy and Elaine have said. You know, this with the tree saying about the voice of a singular identity. We're looking at community. And for all I know, I've got an entire community in my brain. So, you know, my smells, my hearing, my sense of touch. And Elaine, you said about a surreal feeling of presence in one of your poems. And that interests me much more, because I think, you know, the imagination can be incredibly logical. And I think what we often think of as rational is ludicrous. I mean, it's fabricated. So I would really like to move away from that binary. I'm not sure what I'd want to replace it with, but, you know, I would just say bring it all in.
Yeah.
And, you know, you want your poem to tilt and lean and set off a firework and sometimes put a drawing pin up your ass or something. I mean, you know, you want all the things.
Yeah.
So I would like to complicate that phrase rather than answer the question, if that's okay.
A fantastic poetic answer. I do actually want to, I'm just really interested. So you said the imagination can be incredibly logical. Can you expand on that? I love it. I know what you mean. I want to hear more, really.
Well, I mean, the imagination can lead me in a way that, for me, shows me a truth of how things unfold. So, you know, if I think sometimes a poem is like a map of how I'm thinking, and that map usually involves great leaps, and, you know, so maybe a memory will swerve in, maybe a smell will swerve in. But I've been taught that that isn't necessarily logical. So, you know, logic tends to exist in paragraphs and follow a progression. I don't think like that. Mm-hmm. So I think some of the way in which we categorize things is problematic.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that it's problematic. That's good, right? Anyway, Eleni, how do you feel then that the best poetry uses both sides of the brain, the logical and the magical, if you like?
I feel that both Mandy and Alison articulated it so well. All I can say is that as someone who spent most of her adult life at universities as a researcher, you sort of are always on this boundary between being logical and at the same time opening your mind to all the illogical things and trying to capture them on paper. And it is really intriguing for me that there have been so many scientists who have turned out to be wonderful artists, whether poets or painters or, you know, other creative arts. So I do feel that there is something about this cross-modal correspondence, something about being able to cross the boundary. And I think it's fascinating how much detail, how much attention we pay to detail as poets and as scientists. And that is perhaps something that unites the brain parts that I don't believe are as separate as perhaps that metaphor is saying. Just like Alison said, it is really about trying to understand their correspondences. And yeah, I feel that by being able to touch on both identities in terms of the scientist and the poet in me, I felt the wonderful possibility of having the privilege of exploring that continuum.
Fantastic. Yeah. So kind of like a fabric where everything is woven together. I'm going to take this opportunity now because I have 3 fantastic researchers in front of me, and I'm going to twist it slightly because we often talk, we often talk about process and your poetry. But what I would like to do now is ask you about how you approach reading poetry, really for a tip for me more than anything else. So like when you encounter a difficult poem for the first time, I would like to know how you tackle it. Do you go for the sounds first? Do you go for the words first? Do you look at references? I'm just kind of interested how you might tackle, how you first, if you see a poem and you know for the first time, how do you read it, Mandy?
Gosh, I read first thing in the morning. That's my kind of waking act, I think, is to read poetry with my first cup of tea before I get out of bed. And I read very so in a sort of still in a sort of semi-dream state, I think, like at that time of day. And I read in a very straightforward manner from the beginning on, in a linear kind of manner. And then I just keep whatever it is that I've got on the top of the pile and the thing beside the bed. I just keep reading until something makes me stop and go and cease to be linear. And then at some stage, and I don't kind of, I'm not in control. I don't think of when that is. At some stage, then something makes me kind of go, what? And then finding myself going back and reading something again. And so that, and sometimes, you have a collection or you have something and there's something makes you kind of think, how's this going to end? And like, or like, what's this like? Sometimes, a collection, you kind of go, how is this made? How is this structured? What is going on here? And so sometimes I will sort of zoom out to that kind of like, what's the overall form here? And like a big poem, quite often difficult poems are big poems, I think. And then I would need to do that thing of, either, but I would generally, as a first step, start from the beginning and go on until something makes me stop and get non-linear about it and start then seeing how things connect. Secondly, try and zoom out so that I can see what the overall shape is and sort of see if that gives me a clue in terms of what the overall form of something is and what the poet is trying to do structurally. And then if there's something that for some reason I know I have to read and I'm finding it difficult, then voicing it is absolutely essential. I think engaging, because the wonderful thing about poetry is, of course, is that it's not just sort of a semantic exercise, it's also a musical exercise very often, and a sonic exercise anyway. And then sometimes, doing that thing, and I think it can happen quite easily in the morning where you kind of glaze out and you get a sense of what something is like visually and on the page. So those would be that's how I go about it, I guess. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Mandy. Alison, how about you?
What a fabulous answer.
Thanks, Mandy.
Yeah. Like you, I read in the morning when I'm not too awake, so I can get into the dream a bit more. Sometimes if it's difficult, I just stop reading it and read something else, because
there's so much out there.
It's like sometimes it's not the right time. I might read it in a year's time and I will have had different experiences and I'll be like, oh my God, how have I never found this poem before? I guess I try and come at it sideways sometimes, but the real thing for me with a difficult poem is reading it with other people. So I teach every week online and we always read text together, and I find that to be the best way to have a community of readers, and then it's like 10 different windows open onto the poem, and I really like that, and I really like having permission to not understand something. So sometimes I like to welcome the difficulty and incomprehension and to let it stay as that, and then just see. I mean, I have quite a lot of somatic practices, so I then like to see what that does in my body. What's it like to sit with something that I really don't get? You know, maybe my elbow starts to ache, or maybe I just like, it's like, I've got to get out of this room. I'm curious how my whole body will respond to it. And so I don't always try to make something difficult not difficult. I might try and find a way of it becoming more difficult. But I think the community of readers, that to me, I mean, I love reading texts with other people. I find that one of the most illuminating and kind of nourishing things. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alison. And another amazing answer. Yeah, I actually have never experienced it in my elbow yet, but I'm going to maybe tomorrow. Eleni, Eleni, finally over to you. Yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, you know, so I like the answer Alison gave us in terms of making the collective experience, because the answers that have been given so far are really inspiring to me. I guess if I'm trying to answer from the individual point of view, when I read something difficult, I try to translate it to different languages, because I acquire different languages at different points in my life, and it is often connected to a specific vocabulary and history and the feelings you had at that time. So often it helps with the processing of the feelings and emotions that are being expressed in a difficult poem. You know, you're trying to meet the different selves with the different identities that you may have had or you might have in the future. So that's my way of dealing with difficult poems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much. Unfortunately, I can't translate it into Slovakian and Norwegian like you can, but those are fantastic answers. Thank you so very, very much. I think it's time to say goodbye to the three of you now. Thank you so much for those wonderful readings. And I loved talking to you, and I would love to talk to you again. So thank you very much to the three of you, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have time for our final. Oh, I'm feeling a little sad. Our final open mic. But I am so happy that we have Brenda here, because Brenda here has been with us on the open mic for a long time now. So Brenda, over to you.
Thank you, Iain. And I want to say I'm going to miss this community. I'm so happy for what Mila and Stephanie did to put this together 5 years ago, and I hope it comes back in some other iteration. The poem I'm going to read is dedicated to my brother, who just passed 3 days ago, and I had written this poem for him on Father's Day, so I'm reading it in his honor. Please do not feed the javelinas. When a father cries, gnats fly into his eyes in alarming formations. Like snow geese chicks launching from a rocky ledge, every teardrop is a headbang, a sharpness, a concussing flight at its sudden end, a knock at 3 a.m. Grim-faced and searching for the trail he must have lost, the stitch in time he dropped on his way to catching a falling child, pushed out of the nest with wax wings, jumbled secrets, tin-can armor, and an eagerness to please that cannot be sated, harboring an unholy resistance to the passions of time and a hunger for the Father's eye.
Brenda, that was absolutely beautiful. I would like to say sorry for your loss, and what a beautiful poem and what a beautiful way to end our session. So Brenda, thank you so very, very much, and no doubt see you in the poetry world again soon. So that's it for the fourth Poetry In session. Do join us in half an hour. We will have a closing ceremony, including Mila's conclusion, I believe, on how poetry can change the world, and maybe a few recollections on some of the fantastic times that we've had over the last 5 years. Thanks everyone for joining. All the best.